Hey church, I want to invite you in to sign up for Circles. Circles is a new way for you to be intentional with people in your life. We're asking you to find 2 to 3 people in your life. Maybe that's friends, family, it could be coworkers that you want to invite into your circle. Then you go to summitonline.tv/circles. You sign up there and you'll receive text messages of verses, maybe an encouraging word, things that then you can copy and paste and send those to people in your circle. I hope you sign up today.
Hey Summit Church, thank you so much for joining us from wherever you are. Whether this is your first time or maybe you've been attending for a while, we want to get connected with you. So click the link below in the description, let us know more about you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions about who we are and just to get to know you a little bit better. Maybe you have a prayer request. We would love to pray with you. There is a separate link below in the comments. Click on that. Let us know how we can be praying with you and for you, especially during this season. Generosity is so important, and your generosity helps us further the mission of Summit, especially during a time like this when we can give back to our communities. So take a moment, click the link below, and help us give and serve our communities today. Wherever you're at today, we know that God has something great in store for you. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the chat.
Welcome to Church Online. My name is Jared. I'm the online campus pastor. Here at Summit, we believe that prayer unlocks the power of God. You can text Summit Prayer to 94090 anytime this week, and you'll get a response back that just asks for your name and your prayer requests. I would love to come alongside you and be praying with you and for you. This week, we're finishing a 2-week series called Idols. Our associate pastor, Nathan Tate, has an amazing message for you. I pray you have a wonderful week, and thanks for joining.
Well, hi and welcome to Summit Online. We're so glad that you're here with us today. If this is your first time or if you haven't been here for a few weeks, you've caught us right in the middle of a 2-week series called Idols. We're looking at these things that we put ahead of God. And so today I want to start, as I started last week, with the same question. Are there things in your life that you value so much, you've become obsessed with them? Things that maybe you've put into the first place in your life where only God belongs. In reviewing what we talked about last week of what an idol is, Pastor John Bryson defines it this way: idols are God substitutes. Idols are good things that when we make them the greatest things, they become sinful things. Idols are anything we look to other than God for our ultimate meaning, validation, hope, happiness, and purpose. God tells us, He told Moses in Exodus chapter 20, not to have idols. He gives the very first 2 commands of the 10 commandments are this: don't have any other gods before me, God says, and don't create any images in place of me to worship. But there's 2 kinds of idols. Again, we looked at this last week. There's 2 kinds of idols: surface idols and deep idols. Surface idols are the things that we struggle with. They're things that maybe that we put too much value on, like people or things. They're things that are maybe like addictions or sins that have us trapped. And they're the way that a lot of times we manifest this desire to have something other than God in the first position of our life. But as we talked about, there's also deep idols. There's things underneath the surface that actually cause those other things to rise to the top. And those are the things we need to deal with. We need to deal with the deep root causes of those surface idols. And last week we talked about control, the deep idol of control, and how if we want to play God, we stand as Adam and Eve did in front of these 2 trees, the tree of life, where we can eat of that fruit and live forever, and then in front of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, where we're tempted to control our own lives, we're tempted to make decisions for our own lives, we're tempted to be the God of our own life and say, I'll decide what's right and I'll decide what's wrong for my life. But today we're going to look at 2 other idols: comfort and significance. 2 other deep root causes for a lot of the problems that we face today. Are there people or things that you are giving a better position, a higher position in your life than you should, that you're letting take the place of God? And what is the root cause of that? So let's jump into this first deep idol Comfort. Comfort. So let me start by asking you this question. What's your favorite comfort food? What's your favorite comfort food? I think of fried chicken. I think of mashed potatoes. I think of steak, chicken and dumplings. I don't know what is it for you. Some of you already, though, you're like, man, no way. You're like my mother-in-law. You scrape all that meat to the side and act like you ate it so you can get to the real comfort food, dessert, right? Dessert is the ultimate comfort food. So here's my question to you. How do you rank desserts? Now, I realize I'm going to make some enemies with this today, but I got to tell you, some of you, your favorite dessert probably falls at the bottom. So let me give you my list. I'm going to start from the bottom. My least favorite dessert, number 6, and I don't know if I got them all, but number 6, my least favorite dessert is cake. Now, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. If cake is in the house and there's nothing else, I'll eat it. You can ask my wife. I'll eat cake because I like sweets, but it's not the top. And then right above that is pie. Now, I like me some pie, but it's not at the top of my list. You guys are thinking, what's at the top of his list, right? Well, what's the next? Well, 4th would be candy. See, candy is one of those things I really like, but is it really dessert? It's just something, it's a snack. You got it around, but I still put it in the list of desserts. So cake, pie, candy. Here we get to the top 3. Number 3, my 3rd favorite dessert is cookies. There's nothing like a warm chocolate chip cookie that comes out of the oven, right? The comfort that I feel, the pleasure that I feel getting to eat a cookie. That's amazing, but that's not number 1. Number 2 is kind of like a cookie, but I think it deserves its own category, and that's a brownie. Number 2, the second best kind of dessert you can have is a brownie, and number 1, here it is, guys, ice cream. Ice cream is number 1. How can you go wrong with ice cream, right? Here's the best thing. My favorite dessert, you take a chocolate chip cookie and you put it down the bowl. And then you put a brownie on top of that. And then you put a scoop of ice cream. Is that heaven, right? Is that comfort? We love comfort. I love dessert. I love, that's a good comfort food. I just read a story that happened a couple of weeks ago. There was a guy who was looking for sweets in his house. And he couldn't find anything. And so then he remembered back in 2012, Hostess had said that they were going to quit making Twinkies. And so in 2012, he bought a box of Twinkies. And it was down in his basement. So he went down there and he got this 8-year-old box of Twinkies out, opened it up. You know, Twinkies last forever, right? We don't even know what they're made of, some space-age material, right? So he gets the Twinkies out and he opens up the box, and this is what he found. You see this picture here. You got this great-looking Twinkie. You got this Twinkie with maybe a bad spot on it. And then you got this shriveled-up-looking, creepy, crawler-looking Twinkie that has fungus all over it. And, well, it didn't stop there. It didn't stop there. The guy thought, you know what? This Twinkie, this one looks all right. So he opens the package, and he took a bite out of it. And inside that Twinkie is this other picture that you'll see here, that what that cream looked like. Here's what it's supposed to look like, and here's what it looked like. And all the article said is, as he retched. That means throw up to some of you guys. You know, I mean, can you imagine biting into an 8-year-old Twinkie? And the one with fungus all over it got sent to a lab because they need to figure out what all this fungus is that grew in 8 years on this Twinkie. But you know, I think sometimes that's what it looks like when we're trying to chase after things that we think that are going to bring us pleasure, and they may look good on the outside. But then we bite into them, and what we discover is something wretched. This deep idol of comfort. You think things like this: if I can just maintain physical ease or relaxation, if I can just be laid back, if I can just keep from stress or responsibility and experience some pleasure and enjoyment, then life will be more fulfilling, more easy, more fun, or more thrilling. It manifests itself in surface idols. It kind of looks like this. Maybe it's in overeating. Maybe it's in relaxation that leads to laziness. Maybe for some of you, it's failure to launch. Some of you people need to move out of your parents' basement. You know, I mean, you just want to stay in that comfort level. It's thinking a vacation will solve your problems. It gets into more serious surface problems like lust and porn addiction and flirting with someone at the office, and maybe even into a full-blown affair. It manifests itself in things like addictions to gaming or to sports or to your kids' activities or living through your kids, and through leisure and excessive alcohol or drug use and overspending. But here's the problem. All of those things that we think are going to bring us pleasure most of the time deliver about like an 8-year-old Twinkie. You bite into it and you think that you're going to get the pleasure that you need, and what you find out is it leaves you wanting. Comfort is a belief, it's actually a lie, that pleasure in things other than God will bring ultimate happiness. It's believing that lie we talked about last week, the lie for all foundational and root idols, that we can go around God and we can run away from God, not run to God to find ultimate pleasure and ultimate happiness. You're back in front of those two trees we talked about. You're back in front of the tree of life. And you're back in front of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And in Genesis 3:6, the serpent says to them, eat of this tree. And then it says in verse 6, when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was, here it is, good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. She bought the lie that it looked good, and she thought it was going to bring her the pleasure and the comfort that she was looking for, and it didn't. It ultimately led to her destruction. There was another guy in the Bible that struggled with comfort. His name was King David. You find his story in 2 Samuel chapter 11, verses 1 through 5. You find this story about him, and start with verse 1. It says, in the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, there's your first clue that something was wrong. He stayed home when he should have been going off to war. He wanted to stay in the comfort of home when he should have been going with his men to battle. It says, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army, and they destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained in Jerusalem. And one evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. When you're in that leisure time, and your guard is down. He's walking around the roof of the palace, and from the roof he saw a woman bathing. One look's not bad, but he looked again. And he continued to look, and it says the woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. Now he's not just looking, now he's going to find out her situation. The man said, she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Should have been over, right? No, not for David. When he saw what he wanted, he went after it. Then David sent messengers to get her, and she came to him, and he slept with her. And now she was purifying herself from her monthly uncleanness. And then she went back home, and the woman conceived and sent word to David, saying, I am pregnant. David went on to have Uriah the Hittite killed to cover up for what he did. Well, first he tried to get Uriah to sleep with his own wife so that he could say the baby was his. And Uriah wouldn't do it. So he ended up having him killed so he could have Bathsheba for himself. And the baby died. David had many family problems throughout his whole life. His family was a wreck. His children were a wreck. All these things, he made several bad choices. But in 1 Kings chapter 15, verse 5, it tells us that this was the one thing that God saw as a failure. It says that David did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the days of his life, except in the case of Uriah the Hittite. Chasing after comfort and pleasure got David into all kinds of trouble. Well, there's some warning signs for us that you might be struggling with the deep idol of comfort. The first is the fear of responsibility. Real happiness is found, you think, apart from responsibility. You hide from obligation. Responsibility is a weight that's just holding you down. You can't see how responsibility is shaping your future. So if you're struggling with comfort, with this comfort idol, you might be running from the responsibility that you need to take. Another warning sign is dependence on consumption. You're preoccupied with things like, what do I want? When do I want it? How much do I want? And nothing else. You want to just keep consuming, and you never have enough. And once you've consumed, you want more. And then when you get more, you want even more. And you just continue to consume and consume. It keeps you going, but it never truly satisfies you. It fills you up, but it leaves you wanting. Leaves you unfulfilled. This preoccupation, by the way, with consumption is just a diversion. It's not going to take you away from the stress of your life. But I see so many people, hey, I've struggled myself with consuming things thinking that's going to help me get away from the stress and the anxiety I'm dealing with in my life. Another warning sign that you're struggling with consumption is this tendency to escape. You're always looking for an escape. Rather than dealing with the harshness of life and to feel the pain, you create these alternative realities. You begin to lie about who you really are, and you just begin to create this whole alternative world that if I could just go to this place on the weekend, or if I could just go on this vacation, my life would be better and I would be more at ease. You have excessive hobbies. You work too much. You try to escape, and you might even fantasize about escaping from your marriage or from your kids. But here's the warning. The warning is this, that alternative realities have a short shelf life. They will not bring you what you're looking for. Do you struggle with this? Do you struggle with looking for comfort and pleasure in things other than God? Are you standing in front of these two trees, the tree of life, which if you get to eat from that, you live forever, or in front of this other tree where you're saying, well, that fruit looks good even though it's forbidden. I've been told I'm not supposed to do that. But you somehow think that you can do it differently than the way God told you to do it. If you do, there's a battle plan. The battle plan is the same as we shared last week when it comes to control. You're just asking the same questions about a different deep idol. Here it is. First of all, you've got to admit the struggle. You've got to look inside yourself and say, do I struggle with this idol of comfort? Is it something that I'm chasing after things and people to bring pleasure to my life instead of letting God be who I delight in? And then you've got to identify the lie. You got to ask yourself that question. Why? What is it? What situation has happened in my life? Or why do I struggle with this? Why am I chasing after? Why am I consuming things? Why am I running from responsibility? Why am I trying to escape? You hear those lies and you hear the answers to those lies, and then you replace those lies with the truth. What are the promises of God that destroy those lies that you're believing? Let me just give you one. Psalm chapter 37, verse 4. It says this, delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Now, you can take this verse and you can twist it to mean something it doesn't mean. You can say, well, as long as I'm following God, I get whatever I want. The verse is saying that, but what it's saying is the things that you want might be changing because you're delighting yourself in the Lord. You're finding pleasure in Him and in Him alone. And when you find pleasure in God and God alone, you will begin to change how you think. Matthew West, songwriter, wrote this week. He said, instead of praying, God, give me what I want, I'm learning to pray, God, show me what you want and change my heart until it wants the same thing. Let me say it again. I'm learning to pray, God, show me what you want and change my heart until it wants the same thing. You see, find your pleasure and your comfort in God alone. Find it in Him first, and you will find the comfort that you're looking for. Are you struggling with that deep idol? Maybe it's control, maybe it's comfort. How about this third one? The deep idol of significance. The deep idol of significance. Let me ask it to you in this way. Let me ask this question. Do you worry too much about what other people think of you? Do you spend too much time worrying about how people view you, how people see you? I asked my wife permission to share this story because her brother struggled with this. Terry was someone who worried so much about what other people thought of him. He created alternate realities like I just talked about. He worried so much about what people thought. He lied about who he was. He lied about what he had. He lied about how significant he was. He was always trying to please people. He was hiding the real self. He was lying to them and worrying about what they thought of him. He spent money to impress people. And 2 years ago, it became obvious, and we found out that he had multiple strokes, but he was so worried that people would see that as a sign of weakness, he didn't go to the doctor for months, maybe. We don't even know. They might have gone back over a year. So my wife finally got him to go to the ER, and come to find out he had strokes. He had more strokes on Christmas or New Year's Eve, 2018. That desire to be liked by everyone literally cost him his life. Because he worried so much and he was so stressed out about what people thought of him that he couldn't control what it did to his body. See, the deep aisle of significance is a dangerous one. It says that if a certain person, a certain social group, or the colleagues in my profession, if they find me worthy of attention or love, if they acknowledge my value or greatness, as long as I am not disgraced before them, then I'll be important and I'll be acceptable. It surfaces, it manifests itself in things like eating disorders and constantly performing to get attention or approval. It manifests itself in workaholism, trying to prove your worth. It shows itself in materialism and an unhealthy view of money and things. It might even show itself in religion or legalism, trying to appear that you're better than you really are. It might show itself in the way that you use relationships and use friends. It definitely shows itself in narcissism. But you might find yourself, because of all that, caught in toxic relationships and toxic marriages and toxic friendships. It also shows itself in despair and in depression and in anxiety. And as I just shared with you about my brother-in-law, maybe even death. Because that all has a toll, takes a toll on your body. And often you end up just exhausted. Exhausted because you're trying to perform for everybody. And you just don't ever even like yourself. Significance is a belief, it's a lie that being seen as better than you feel, better than you even know that you are, will bring ultimate purpose and meaning to your life. That if people could just see you as this, even if that's not who you are, that somehow you'll feel better about yourself. And so you spend all this time trying to let them see that person that doesn't even exist. It feeds on the opinion of others, and it's even controlled by them. It cares more about what others think rather than what God thinks. It's an ugly trap that will drag you down. We go back to our story in Genesis. Adam and Eve standing there in front of these trees, right? And you go to verse 5, what the serpent says to Eve is amazing. And it shows us this. It says, for God knows, verse 5, that when you eat of this fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, your eyes will be open, and here it is, and you will be like God. Doesn't that sound great? Last week we talked about control and your desire to be God of your own life, but this is just hearing that in the voice that says someone actually will see you as that important. Someone will see you as being like God. And that tickled their ears enough to make them take of that fruit. Let's go back to our story of David. We're actually going to go earlier in his life. Because in 1 Samuel chapter 10, there was a guy named Saul. And Saul was anointed as king of Israel. And the people loved him. They had begged for a king. They had rejected God as their king, and they wanted an earthly king like all the other nations. And they loved him, and he had great victories over the enemies, but he did some things. He did some things he wasn't supposed to do. He offered sacrifices even though he wasn't a priest, and that was definitely outside of God's will for anyone's life. And then he went into a battle, and he tried to keep the spoil of the battle for himself, even though he was told to destroy everything. He kept all the valuable things, and he kept the women. He even let the king be alive, and when the prophet Samuel caught him, he repented, but at that point, God rejected him as king. God said, you can't be king anymore. And he decided to choose someone else. And in 1 Samuel chapter 16, we read the story where the prophet Samuel went to the house of Jesse and chose his youngest son, the eighth of 8 boys, chose David to be king. And Samuel anointed him as king. And you'd think, okay, 1 Samuel chapter 16, David becomes king, Saul is out. No, that's not what happened. Saul continued to be king. David was just the heir apparent. But David knew it and Samuel knew it, but it wasn't common knowledge to all the people. They still worshiped Saul as their king. So then you get to chapter 17, and David went in. He became a servant of Saul. He played the harp for him whenever Saul got tormented by this evil spirit. And then David went into battle against Goliath because no one else would fight this big giant of the Philistines. And David defeated him. And the people began to favor David. Listen to this. 1 Samuel 18, verses 6 through 8. Listen to what it said. As they were coming home when David returned from striking down the Philistine, the women came out of all the cities of Israel singing and dancing to meet King Saul. All right, stop. You get it? King Saul's coming back from the battle. He didn't defeat the king, but it was a shared victory, right? And the women come out to sing. Can't you see Saul going, all right, here it comes. They're gonna tell me how great I am. They came out to meet him with tambourines and with songs of joy and with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they celebrated, Saul has struck down his thousands. I mean, can't you see Saul's head getting bigger and he's just getting excited? And then they follow that up with, and David his 10,000s. Got to be careful when you elevate yourself, because someone else is going to humble you. The Bible tells us that. And Saul was very angry. And this saying displeased him. This is a saying that you'll read over and over and over again, as they attributed this saying to David. It was this dig at Saul almost every time. Saul killed thousands, David killed 10,000s. He was angry and it displeased him. And he said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom? David was best friends with Saul's son Jonathan. David married Saul's daughter, Michal, and yet Saul was so jealous of him that he tried to kill him several times. And David lived his life on the run and even had the chance to kill Saul. And when he was given that chance, he told his men, I will not come against the Lord's anointed. You remember, David's been anointed as king. He just hasn't been declared king. He hasn't risen to that place yet. He's still continuing to honor Saul as king. He wouldn't come against him. You see, Saul was eaten up by the significance idol, while David waited for God to elevate him to power. David didn't even become king until the beginning of 2 Samuel chapter 1, after Saul died at the end of 1 Samuel. And when Saul died, David even wept because Saul had died. You would think if David was so like me sometimes, that I want to take that position. Wait a minute, God gave me that position. David had every right to take that position. But he waited on God patiently. But Saul was eaten up with this idol to be looked at as more significant than others. I don't know about you, but I have this question. What would you have done? I'm afraid I don't know if I would have been like David, if I'd have been able to wait back like that. Here's some warning signs. Warning signs that maybe you struggle with the deep idol significance. The approval trap. You get caught up in the approval trap. You have a fear of man. You're driven by fear. You're overly concerned with disappointing or upsetting other people. You're a people pleaser. You're afraid to say no or set boundaries. Schedule is too busy. You have a low self-esteem. You're afraid to tell people what you really think. You avoid opportunities where you might fail. You constantly are managing other people's perception of you. Here's a big one. You're hypersensitive to criticism. You respond to criticism either with arrogance, they don't know what they're talking about, with anger, I can't believe they would say that to me, or with despair. You do understand, don't you, that hubris, pride, and despair are opposite ends of this same idol. You might one day be arrogant and full of yourself when you're struggling with significance, but the other time you may swing all the way to despair and to anxiety and to depression. Not only is approval trap a warning sign, but the recognition trap is a warning sign. You have pride, you hunger for admiration and fame, you're fueled by comparison with other people. You're crushed when you don't get recognition. Listen. The reality is this: my significance doesn't come from others telling me how great I am. My significance comes from the Father who has sacrificed everything for my salvation. Tom Brady, who's now the quarterback of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, was the quarterback of New England Patriots for several years. He's won 6 Super Bowls. At the time of this quote, he'd only won 3. But listen to what he said, and tell me if you can see a struggle with significance for someone who's been very successful. Why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater out there for me? I mean, maybe a lot of people would say, hey man, that is what is. I reached my goal, my dream, my life. Me, I think, God, it's got to be more than this. Can you imagine achieving all of that and looking back and realizing there's more. I can tell you right now, church, that if you struggle with letting other things give you validation instead of God, you will always be like this, found wanting. You can be at the top, the pinnacle of whatever you choose to do, and you will still be found wanting until you let God be the reason that you have significance and validation in your life. And then another trap is a relationship trap, a warning sign, a relationship trap. You feel less than without a relationship. You have a companion. You have to have a companion to be happy. So again, what's the battle plan? How do we take care of this? The battle plan is the same. First of all, you got to admit the struggle. You got to say, am I struggling with this? Do I struggle with the idol of significance? Do I look to other people to validate me instead of looking to God? Then you got to identify the lie. Why? What has happened to cause this to have a hold on you? I'm just going to be really gut level honest with you. This is one I struggle with. I struggle with all three of them, but this is one I really struggle with. And at one point I had to go back and identify the lies. And when I was 11, my father died. That was a lie that the enemy told me, that you're not worth anything. Your dad's not even here. I grew up without a father. Then when I was in college, I had a fiance that broke off the engagement. And I thought my world was going to be over. And I felt rejected to the point that I thought no one would ever love me. I'm going to die alone. Then I was in ministry and I got fired from 2 different churches. I'm just telling you right now, you pretty much look to God and say, you can't use me anymore when that happens. But those were lies from the enemy. And if I allow those things to take over in my life, I will find myself worshiping all kinds of idols. I will find myself stuck in addictions. I will find myself doing things that I shouldn't be doing, trying to somehow find that significance that the enemy's lying. So you identify that lie, and then you do what I've tried to do, and I have to do every day, is to replace that lie with the truth. What the promises of God. Here's the truth. I can seek God's approval only. I can seek significance from God's approval, not from man. That's where I find my true validation. Colossians 3:23 and 24 says, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord, not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You're serving the Lord Christ. So, how do we respond? We respond by following that battle plan. If you're struggling with control, you surrender control of your life and you trust in the Lord to set your path. If you're struggling with comfort, you find your delight and your pleasure in God and in God alone. And if you're struggling with significance, you glorify God and you let His approval for you be enough. You're standing at these 2 trees, and one gives you the ability to partake of fruit that lets you live forever. The tree of God, the tree of life. And you're standing in front of this other tree that will take you down a path to traps that will keep you from living out the life that God has for you. I have to make this choice every day. I fail almost daily. But when I begin to let God have these areas of my life, I begin to see Him take control. I begin to see Him rescue me from this incessant need to worship idols and let them be in the place that only He belongs. Today, will you choose to let God be the one that you worship alone? Pray with me. Father God, we thank you. We praise you for everything that you've done for us. I thank you that I am yours and that I can find everything I need in you, that I can run to you to find all of the pleasure, all of the purpose, all of the protection that I need. God, help me look nowhere else. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Speak to me. You're the only draw near. If you're not in it, then I don't want it. Let our lips fade away. Take the whole world and give me Jesus. Let our lips fade away. Satisfied, you're the only one I'll ever need. Holy fire, burn away the old that stands between. You're not in it, and I don't want it. Let our lips fade away. Take the whole world and give me Jesus. Let our lips fade away. Let our lips fade away. We surrender to you, Jesus. You're all that we want. You're all that we need. Your name is the only name that matters. Your heart is all that I desire. Not my will, but yours alone forever. Here's my life, have your way. Your name is the only name that matters. Your heart is all that I desire. Not my will, but yours alone forever. Here's my life, have your way. Here's my life, have your way. Here's my life, have your way. If you're not in it, and I don't want it, let our lips fade away. Take the whole world and give me Jesus. Let our lips fade away. Let our lips fade away. Speak to me when the silence steals my voice. You understand me. You understand me. Come to me in the valley of unknowns. You understand me. You understand me. You understand me, God. You understand me. So I throw all my cares before you. My doubts and fears don't scare you. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought. So I stop all negotiations. Father's hands. Leave the rest in the Father's hands. I will rest in the Father's hands. Leave the rest in the Father's hands. I will rest in the Father's hands. Leave the rest in the Father's hands. I will rest in the Father's hands. Leave the rest in the Father's hands. So I throw all my cares before you. My doubts and fears don't scare you. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought. So I stop holding negotiations with the God of all creation. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought you
I hope this message brought you encouragement. If you want to be connected here at Summit, follow the link in the description below, and we'd love to be in contact with you. If you want more information about circles and the importance of having an inner circle, go to summitonline.tv/circles to get signed up today. Right now, we'll have some discussion questions come up on the screen. Our hope is that you use these questions to have conversations with people in your life. Thank you again for joining us. We love you, and we'll see you next week.